Marcus Chen had always believed that first contact with aliens would involve grand speeches, diplomatic ceremonies, and maybe a few uncomfortable handshakes with beings who had too many fingers. He never imagined it would happen while he was trying to fix a broken coffee machine on a remote mining station at the edge of human space. The Kepler 442 mining outpost was humanity's furthest reach into the void. A small collection of prefabricated modules clinging to an asteroid rich in rare earth metals. Marcus worked as the station's chief engineer, a job that mostly involved keeping ancient machinery running with spare parts and prayer. It was honest work, if lonely, and it paid well enough to support his sister's medical treatments back on Earth. The morning everything changed started like any other. Marcus was elbow deep in the coffee machine's innards, cursing at whoever had thought it was smart to use proprietary components in essential life support equipment when the station's proximity alarms began screaming. The sound echoed through the small facility like the cry of some dying metal beast. He pulled himself out from under the machine and ran to the command center, where his 3 colleagues were already gathered around the main display. Sarah Kim, the station commander, stood with her arms crossed, staring at something on the screen that made her face go pale. Behind her, the twins Jake and Tom Morrison whispered to each other in the rapid-fire shorthand that only siblings develop. "What's the situation?" Marcus asked, though he could already see it for himself. The display showed a massive ship approaching their position, easily 50 times larger than their entire station. It moved with the smooth grace of something alive, its hull shifting between colors like oil on water. "Unknown vessel, no response to our hails," Sarah said without taking her eyes off the screen. "It just appeared on our sensors 20 minutes ago, decelerating from near light speed. Either they have technology we can't even imagine, or they've been coasting for decades just to reach us." Marcus felt his stomach drop. The implications were staggering. If this ship had been traveling at relativistic speeds, it meant whoever was aboard had been planning this encounter for longer than the mining station had even existed. They had known humans would be here. "Any idea who they are?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Take a wild guess," Tom Morrison said, his voice tight with nervous energy. "Think we're looking at our first official alien contact?" The ship continued its approach, and Marcus found himself holding his breath as more details became visible. The vessel wasn't just large, it was beautiful in a way that human engineering had never achieved. Curves flowed into each other like frozen music, and lights pulsed along its hull in patterns that seemed almost like breathing. It looked like something that had grown rather than been built. "Incoming transmission," Jake announced, his fingers flying over his console. "It's on multiple frequencies, using mathematical constants as a base language. Whoever they are, they're trying to establish peaceful communication." Sarah nodded grimly. "Put it through the translator protocols. Let's see what they want." The speakers crackled for a moment, then a voice emerged. Musical and strange, with undertones that made Marcus's teeth ache. The translation software worked frantically to convert the alien speech into something resembling English, resulting in a stilted but understandable message. "Greetings, small builders in the void. We are the Jacquerie Exploration Fleet of the Galactic Confederation. We seek peaceful contact with your species. Request permission to dock for cultural exchange." The 4 humans looked at each other in silence. First contact protocols existed, buried somewhere in their technical manuals, but Marcus doubted anyone had seriously expected to use them. They were mining engineers, not diplomats. "We don't exactly have a choice, do we?" Sarah finally said. "Our entire station could fit in their cargo bay. If they wanted to destroy us, we'd already be space dust." She keyed the communications array. "Unknown vessel, this is Kepler 442 mining station. We welcome peaceful contact. However, our docking facilities are not designed for vessels of your size. Please advise on how you wish to proceed." The response came quickly. "Understood, small builders. We will deploy a contact pod. Prepare to receive 2 members of our crew for initial discussions. We mean no harm to your nest." Marcus felt a flutter of excitement mixed with terror. He was about to meet beings from another world, possibly another galaxy. Part of him wanted to run and hide in the deepest part of the station. Another part wanted to put on his best clothes and practice his handshake. "I'll handle the reception," Sarah said, reading his thoughts. "You 3 keep the station running and monitor their approach. If something goes wrong, I want us ready to evacuate." 20 minutes later, a sleek pod separated from the alien mothership and glided toward their docking port with impossible smoothness. Marcus watched through the observation window as it attached itself to their airlock with mechanical precision. The pod itself was a work of art, all flowing lines and subtle curves that seemed to shift in the light. The airlock cycled, and Marcus held his breath as the inner door opened to reveal their visitors. The first thing that struck him was how tall they were. The two aliens stood nearly 8 feet high with lean, elegant builds that reminded him of dancers. Their skin had a faint blue-green tint and seemed to shimmer with an inner light. They wore form-fitting suits that looked more like a second skin than clothing. And their faces were hauntingly beautiful, despite their obvious non-human features. Large, dark eyes dominated faces that were too long and narrow for human proportions, and instead of hair, they had what looked like flexible metallic filaments that moved with a life of their own. But what really caught Marcus's attention was the smaller figure walking behind them. She was clearly of a different species than her companions, though Marcus couldn't immediately tell what kind. She moved with a predator's grace, all controlled power and watchful alertness. Her skin was a deep golden color, marked with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change as she moved. She wore armor that looked both ceremonial and practical, with a long spear strapped to her back that hummed with barely contained energy. But something was wrong. As the group entered the station's main corridor, Marcus could see that the golden-skinned warrior was favoring her left side, and her armor bore obvious damage. Fresh scratches ran along her arms, and there was something in her posture that spoke of recent pain. Sarah stepped forward to greet their visitors, and Marcus quickly moved to join her. He had no official diplomatic role, but curiosity overrode his common sense. "Welcome to Kepler 442 mining station," Sarah said, her voice carefully controlled. "I am Commander Sarah Kim. These are my colleagues Marcus Chen and the Morrison brothers." The lead alien stepped forward and made a gesture that might have been a bow. When he spoke, the translation came through much clearer than before, suggesting their equipment was adapting quickly to the contact. "I am Explorer, Primary Veltar of the Jacquerie Fleet. This is my research partner, Explorer Secondary Nixara." He gestured to his companion, then toward the Golden Warrior. "And this is Honor God Kesva of the Vortag Warrior caste. She travels with us under the protection of Confederation law." Marcus noticed the careful way Velta phrased that last part, as if there was more to the story than he was sharing. The warrior, Kesva, said nothing, but her large amber eyes swept the corridor with the intensity of someone evaluating potential threats. "We appreciate your willingness to make contact," Veltar continued. "Your species has recently achieved faster-than-light travel, which means you are eligible for evaluation for Confederation membership. We are here to assess your technological capabilities and cultural development." Sarah nodded politely, but Marcus could see the wheels turning in her head. The idea that humanity was being evaluated like some kind of cosmic job applicant was probably not sitting well with her. "We're honored by your interest," she said. "Though I should mention that we're just a small mining operation. If you're looking for official representatives of humanity, you'd probably want to contact Earth directly." Beltar's head tilted in a way that might have indicated amusement. "We are aware of your status, Commander Kim. However, the Confederation has found that true understanding of a species comes not from speaking with their leaders, but from observing how they treat those who serve them. A species that cannot care for its own members at the furthest edges of their territory is not ready for the responsibilities of galactic citizenship." The comment hit closer to home than Marcus liked. The mining stations were indeed humanity's forgotten children, operating with minimal support and outdated equipment, while Earth's governments focused on more glamorous projects closer to home. "We understand," Sarah said. "We'll be happy to show you around our facility and answer any questions you might have." As they began walking toward the main operations center, Marcus found himself falling into step beside Caspar. Up close, he could see that her injuries were more serious than he'd initially thought. The scratches on her armor weren't just cosmetic damage, they had penetrated to the underlying metal in several places. More concerning, he could see a slight tremor in her left hand that she was trying to hide. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly, not sure if she could understand him directly, or if everything had to go through the translation system. She turned to look at him with those remarkable amber eyes, and he saw surprise flicker across her features. "I am functional," she said, her voice carrying a strange harmonic quality even through the translator. "Your concern is unexpected." There was something in the way she said it that suggested concern from strangers was not a common experience for her. Marcus felt a pang of sympathy. Even in their brief interaction, it was clear that Kesvo was some kind of soldier or bodyguard, probably used to being seen as a weapon rather than a person. The tour of the station proceeded smoothly enough. Veltar and Nixara asked thoughtful questions about their mining operations, life support systems, and communication networks. They seemed particularly interested in how the small crew managed to maintain such a complex facility with limited resources, and Marcus found himself warming to them despite his initial nervousness. Kesva remained silent throughout most of the tour, but Marcus noticed that she was observing everything with the same intensity she'd shown when they first met. Her training probably taught her to catalog potential threats and escape routes wherever she went. It was when they reached the recreation area that things went wrong. They had just entered the small lounge where the crew spent their off hours, when Kesva suddenly staggered, her left hand going to her side. The spear on her back began to emit a high-pitched whine, and Marcus could see her amber skin going pale around the edges. "Honor guard?" Veltar turned toward her with obvious concern. "Are you experiencing difficulties?" "I am." Kesva started to speak, then swayed dangerously. The spear on her back was now glowing with an ominous red light, and the whining sound was getting louder. "Something's wrong with her weapon," Marcus said, his engineer's instincts kicking in. "It looks like some kind of feedback loop." Nixara pulled out a device that looked like a cross between a smartphone and a medical scanner. She aimed it at Kesva and frowned at the readings. "Her biosigns are destabilizing. The weapon's energy matrix is interfering with her nervous system." "Can you shut it down?" Sarah asked. "Negative," Veltar said grimly. "Vorthak weapons are bio-linked to their wielders. Only she can deactivate it, and only when she is conscious and in control." Kesva took another step forward, and this time her legs gave out entirely. She fell hard, her spear clattering away across the metal floor as she lost consciousness. The weapon's glow intensified, and Marcus could feel the hair on his arms standing up from the electromagnetic interference. "We need to get her to medical treatment immediately," Veltar said, moving toward the fallen warrior. "Wait!" Nixara held up a hand. "Look at the weapon." Marcus followed her gaze and felt his blood go cold. The spear was now pulsing with angry red light, and he could see cracks spreading along its length.
Whatever was happening, the weapon was about to fail catastrophically.
"Everyone get back," he said, his voice sharp with authority.
If that thing explodes, it could take out half the station. But even as he spoke, he found himself moving toward Kesva rather than away. She lay crumpled on the floor, her breathing shallow, and her golden skin growing paler by the second. The logical part of his mind told him to run, to get as far away from the unstable alien weapon as possible. Instead, he knelt beside her and carefully lifted the broken spear from where it had fallen. The moment his hands made contact with the weapon, several things happened at once. The red glow suddenly shifted to a brilliant white light that didn't hurt to look at. The cracks in the spear's surface began to seal themselves with threads of silver energy. And, most shocking of all, Kesva's eyes snapped open. Amber orbs now flecked with the same silver light that was healing her weapon. She looked up at him with an expression of complete shock and whispered something in her own language that the translator didn't attempt to convert.
"What did you do?"
Veltar asked, his voice filled with awe and something that might have been fear. Marcus looked down at the spear in his hands, which now thrummed with stable energy and felt warm to the touch. I just picked it up. I thought it might hurt her if it exploded." Nixara's scanner was beeping frantically as she aimed it at both Marcus and Kesva. "This is impossible," she muttered. The bio readings show a resonance link between them. But that should only be possible if... She trailed off, looking at her scanner as if it had just told her the laws of physics were optional. "If what?" Sarah demanded. Veltar was staring at Marcus with what could only be described as wonder. "If they were bonded," he said quietly. "According to the old laws, when a warrior's weapon fails and another takes it up to defend them, a soul bond is formed between them. But those are just legends. Ancient stories from the early days of the Confederation." Kesva struggled to sit up, her eyes never leaving Marcus's face. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made everyone in the room pay attention.
"Not legends," she said. "Ancient law."
"He lifted my spear to protect me. By the old codes, he is now my chosen one." She paused, and Marcus could see a mix of confusion and something else. Something that looked almost like hope in her amber eyes. "I am bound to him until death claims us both." Marcus felt the weight of the spear in his hands and realized that his simple act of compassion had just changed everything. He was holding an alien weapon that somehow recognized him as its rightful bearer, linked to a warrior from another species through laws he didn't understand. And judging by the expressions on the aliens' faces, he had just stepped into something much bigger than a simple first contact scenario. "I don't understand," he said, looking around at the group. What does this mean exactly? Veltar exchanged a long look with Nixara before answering. It means, Marcus Chen of Earth, that you have just become the first human to invoke one of the most sacred laws in Confederation history. And it means that your life, and the life of Honor Guard Kesva, will never be the same. As if to emphasize his point, the spear in Marcus's hands pulsed once with silver light, and he felt something deep in his chest respond to it. A warmth that spread through his body like sunlight, carrying with it the absolute certainty that whatever was happening, there was no going back. Kesva slowly got to her feet, moving with the fluid grace of a predator despite her recent collapse. She looked at Marcus with an expression he couldn't quite read, then spoke words that would echo in his memory for years to come. You lifted my broken spear to protect me, human. You acted without thought of reward or recognition, driven only by the desire to shield another from harm. By the ancient laws of my people, you have proven yourself worthy of the highest honor a warrior can bestow. She paused, and when she continued, her voice carried the weight of ritual. I am Kesva, last daughter of the Vortark warrior clans. I acknowledge you as my chosen one, my bondmate, my equal in all things. From this moment until the stars grow cold, your battles are my battles, your enemies are my enemies, and your life is as precious to me as my own. Marcus stared at her, still holding her spear, trying to process what she had just said. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a little voice was screaming that this was all happening too fast, that he didn't understand the implications of what he'd gotten himself into. But as he looked into Kesvar's amber eyes and felt the warm pulse of the weapon in his hands, he found that he didn't care about the implications. He had acted to protect someone who needed help, and if that simple act had bound them together through alien laws and ancient traditions, then so be it. I don't know what any of this means, he said honestly. But if you need protection, I'll do my best to provide it. That's what humans do. We look after each other. Kesvar's expression shifted, and for a moment he thought he saw something that might have been tears in her eyes. Look after each other, she repeated softly. Yes, I think I am beginning to understand why the Confederation was so interested in your species. Veltar cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention back to the larger situation. This is unprecedented, he said. We will need to contact the Confederation Council immediately. The bonding of species outside their own kind has not occurred in over 1,000 years. Is that going to be a problem? Sarah asked, her commander instincts clearly worried about the political implications. Not a problem, Nixara said, still staring at her scanner readings, but it will certainly make things interesting. The ancient bonding laws supersede almost all other Confederation regulations. If the bond is genuine, and these readings suggest it is, then Marcus is now technically a member of Vorthak society, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. Marcus felt his head spinning. Rights and responsibilities? Kesva moved closer to him, and he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. The bond makes us equals, Marcus Chen. Your struggles become mine, and mine become yours. Your people's welfare is now my concern, as mine is yours. The spear has chosen you as its bearer, which means you now carry the authority of a Vortark honor guard. And what exactly does a Vortark honor guard do? Marcus asked, though he was beginning to suspect he might not like the answer. Kesva smiled, and it was the first time he had seen her express anything other than professional alertness. It transformed her entire face, making her look younger and somehow more vulnerable. Honor guards protect what matters most, she said simply. And according to ancient law, what matters most to me now is you. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of communications, scans, and increasingly worried conversations between Veltar and various officials back on the Jacquerie mothership. Marcus tried to maintain some sense of normalcy, continuing his engineering duties while carrying Kesva's spear, but nothing felt normal anymore. The weapon had bonded to him in ways he was only beginning to understand, and its presence seemed to enhance his awareness of everything around him. He could feel Kesva wherever she was in the station, like a warm presence at the edge of his consciousness. When she was near, the spear hummed with contentment. When she moved away, it grew restless, its energy signature shifting until she returned. The strangest part was that he found himself responding to these changes, experiencing an odd sense of unease whenever she was out of his direct sight. Sarah had assigned Kesva to quarters near Marcus's, ostensibly to help the aliens coordinate their ongoing cultural exchange. But Marcus suspected his commander was more interested in keeping the bonded pair where she could observe them. The Morrison twins had taken to following Cassisfire around like curious puppies, fascinated by her stories of other worlds and her casual demonstrations of the spear's capabilities. It's not just a weapon, she explained to them during one of these impromptu sessions in the station's recreation area. It's a living construct, grown rather than manufactured. Each spear chooses its bearer based on compatibility of spirit and purpose. Tom Morrison leaned forward eagerly. But how does it choose? What makes someone compatible? HFY glanced at Marcus, who was pretending to read technical manuals while actually listening to every word. The spears respond to those who act from selfless courage, those who would protect others without thought of personal cost. It is a rare quality even among my own people. Is that why you were traveling with the Jacquerie expedition? Jake asked. Were you looking for someone compatible with your spear? The question seemed to touch on something painful, because Kesva's expression closed off, and she turned away from the group. No, she said quietly. I was not looking for anything. I was running away. Marcus felt a sharp pang of emotion through their connection. Shame, guilt, and a deep sense of loss that made his chest tight. Without thinking, he stood up and moved to sit beside her. What were you running from? He asked gently. Kesva looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. My failure, she said finally. I am the last daughter of the Vorthak warrior clans, Marcus. The last of a once proud people who served as honor guards to the greatest families in the Confederation. But I failed in my sacred duty, and in my failure I brought extinction to my entire species. The weight of her words settled over the recreation area like a physical presence. Marcus felt the spear in his hands grow warm, responding to Kesva's emotional state. What happened? Sarah asked, having entered the area just in time to hear the confession. Kesva was quiet for so long that Marcus thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I was assigned to protect the daughter of High Counselor Zephyran, one of the most powerful political families in the Confederation. Her name was Lyrani, and she was everything I was not. Gentle, artistic, full of hope for the future. She was also stubborn and curious, always wanting to explore places that were not safe for someone of her status. Kesva paused, her hands clenching into fists. There was an uprising on the Outer Rim worlds. A terrorist group calling themselves the Liberation Front had been making increasingly bold attacks against Confederation officials. Intelligence suggested they were planning something significant, but no one knew what or where. Marcus could feel the tension building in her, communicated through their bond like electrical current. Lyrani wanted to visit the Kepler 186 art colony, despite my warnings that the system was too close to the areas of unrest. She was preparing for her confirmation ceremony, where she would officially join the Council of Families, and she wanted to commission a special piece from the artists there. Against my better judgment, I agreed to escort her. The spear in Marcus's hands was now glowing softly, responding to the emotional intensity of Kesva's story. He found himself reaching out to place a hand on her shoulder, offering what comfort he could. The Liberation Front had anticipated this, she continued. They had infiltrated the art colony months earlier, posing as artists and craftsmen. When our ship arrived, they were waiting. They had weapons we had never seen before. Energy dampeners that could neutralize our shields, neural disruptors that could incapacitate our guards without triggering alarm systems. Kesva turned to look directly at Marcus, her amber eyes bright with unshed tears. I should have sensed the trap. I should have protected her. But I was overconfident, believing that my training and my spear made me invincible. The Liberation Front took Lyrani while I lay unconscious from their neural attack. By the time I recovered, they had already escaped the system. But you went after them, Jake said. It wasn't a question. Of course I went after them. I tracked them across 6 star systems, fighting my way through their defenses, closing in on their hidden base. But they had planned for that too. When I finally reached them, her voice broke, and Marcus felt a wave of anguish wash over him through their connection. They had already killed her, she whispered. Not quickly, not cleanly. They had tortured her for information about Confederation defenses, about her family's political connections, about weaknesses they could exploit. She died in agony, alone and afraid, while I was still 3 systems away. The recreation area fell silent except for the steady hum of the station's life support systems. Marcus felt tears on his own cheeks, though he couldn't tell if they were his emotions or Kesva's bleeding through their bond. When I reported back to the Vortak Council, Kesva continued, they stripped me of my rank and cast me out. My failure had not only cost Lyrani her life, but it had shattered the alliance between the Vortak clans and the Council of Families. Without that political protection, my people became vulnerable to their enemies. Within 2 years, the last of the Vortak homeworlds had fallen to raiders and corporate exploitation. My people scattered to the winds, and our culture died with them. So you joined the exploration fleet, Sarah said, understanding. I sought exile among the stars, believing that distance might ease the guilt. But guilt is a persistent companion. It follows wherever you go. Kesva looked at the spear in Marcus's hands. When my spear began to malfunction, I thought it was finally rejecting me completely. I thought it had decided I was unworthy to bear it any longer. But it didn't reject you, Marcus said softly. It brought you here, to us. To me? Kesva met his eyes. Yes, and now I am faced with an impossible situation. The ancient laws say that I am bound to you, that your protection is my sacred duty. But how can I protect anyone when I failed so completely before? How can I trust myself not to fail you as I failed Lyrene? Marcus felt something shift inside him, a resolve that seemed to come from both his own heart and from the weapon he carried. Because you're not protecting me alone, he said. The bond works both ways, doesn't it? I'm supposed to protect you too. Marcus, you don't understand, Velta said, entering the conversation for the first time since it had begun. The responsibilities of a Vorthak bond are not symbolic. According to Confederation law, you are now accountable for each other's actions. If Kesva fails in her duties, you share in the consequences. If you act dishonorably, it reflects on her and her people. What people? Tom Morrison asked. She said the Vortak were extinct. Not extinct, Nikasara corrected as she joined the group. Scattered. There are perhaps a few thousand Vortak remaining, working as mercenaries, bodyguards, and soldiers throughout the galaxy. But they have no homeworld, no unified culture, no political representation in the Confederation. Marcus felt a sudden clarity, as if pieces of a puzzle were finally clicking into place. That's why the bonding is so important, he said. It's not just about Kesva and me. It's about what we represent. Veltar nodded approvingly. You are beginning to understand. If a Vortak honor guard has found a worthy bondmate, especially one from a species that is being evaluated for Confederation membership, it sends a powerful message. It suggests that both species possess qualities that the galaxy values. And if we succeed in whatever trials are coming, Marcus continued, the implications becoming clear. It could help both humanity and the surviving Vortak gain standing in the Confederation. But if we fail, Keshva added quietly, it could condemn both our peoples to the margins of galactic society. Sarah whistled low. No pressure then. Before anyone could respond, an urgent chime came from the communication system. Veltar immediately moved to answer it, his expression growing increasingly grave as he listened to the rapid-fire speech in his own language. What is it? Marcus asked when the transmission ended. Confederation Command has responded to our reports about the bonding, Veltar said. They are intrigued. A special tribunal is being convened to evaluate the validity of the bond and to determine what it means for both species. A tribunal? Sarah asked. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, Nixara said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced, but certainly significant. The tribunal will consist of representatives from the major Confederation species, including members of the High Council. They will test the strength of the bond, evaluate both Marcus and Kesvar's worthiness, and determine what rights and responsibilities come with this unprecedented situation. Marcus felt the spear pulse in his hands, as if responding to his growing anxiety. What kind of tests are we talking about? Veltar exchanged a look with Nixara. The traditional trials for bond verification involve demonstrations of loyalty, courage, and sacrifice. The details vary depending on the species involved, but they are designed to prove that the bond is genuine and that both parties are worthy of the responsibilities it entails. And if we fail these trials? Kesva asked. If you fail, Velta said carefully, the bond will be declared invalid. Marcus would be required to relinquish the spear and return to his normal life. Kesva would be exiled permanently from Confederation space, and humanity's application for membership would likely be rejected.
The weight of that revelation settled over the group, like a physical force.
Marcus found himself thinking about his sister back on Earth, about the other mining crews working at the edges of human space, about all the people who might suffer if humanity was rejected by the galactic community. When do these trials begin? He asked. The tribunal ship is already en route, Veltar replied. They will arrive here in 6 days. Until then, you have time to prepare, to strengthen your bond, and to understand what you are fighting for. Marcus stood up, still holding Kesva's spear, and looked around at the assembled group. His colleagues from the mining station who had become his closest friends over the past 2 years, the Jacquerie explorers who had opened a door to the larger galaxy, and HFY, whose tragic history and uncertain future were now inextricably linked to his own. "Then we'd better get started," he said. "If we're going to represent our people in front of the galactic community, we need to understand exactly what that means." HFY stood as well, moving to stand beside him. When she spoke, her voice carried a strength that hadn't been there before. "Yes, and perhaps it is time for me to stop running from my failures and start working towards something better." Marcus felt a surge of warmth through their bond, accompanied by something that felt like hope. The spear in his hands hummed with approval, its energy signature stabilizing in a way that suggested it was pleased with this development. 6 days, Sarah said, moving into command mode. "We'll need to learn everything we can about Confederation law, bonding rituals, and trial procedures. Veltar, Nixara, I hope you're prepared to give us a crash course in galactic politics." "More than that," Veltar said. "We will need to help Marcus understand what it means to carry a Vorthak spear, and help HFY remember what it means to fight for something greater than duty alone." As the group began to disperse, making plans for the intensive preparation ahead, Marcus found himself alone with HFY for the first time since the bonding. She looked at him with an expression he was beginning to recognize, a mix of vulnerability and determination that made his heart ache. "Marcus," she said softly, "I need you to understand something. The trials that are coming will be dangerous. The Confederation does not make its decisions lightly, and they will test us in ways that could cause real harm. If you wish to break the bond before then, before the tribunal arrives, it might still be possible." Marcus looked down at the spear in his hands, feeling its warm weight and the subtle vibration that connected him to the remarkable woman standing before him. He thought about his quiet life on the mining station, about the simple routines and modest goals that had defined his existence until 2 days ago. Then he thought about HFY's story, about the guilt she carried and the people she represented. He thought about humanity's future among the stars, and about the chance, however slim, that their bond might make a difference for both their species. "No," he said firmly. "I don't want to break the bond. I want to understand it, to honor it, and to prove that it means something real." HFY smiled then, the same expression that had transformed her face during their first conversation. And Marcus felt something settle into place in his chest. Not just the bond which had been there since he first touched her spear, but a sense of purpose that he had been missing his entire life. "Then we faced the tribunal together," she said. "Bond mates in truth as well as law." "Together," Marcus agreed, and felt the spear pulse once more with silver light, as if sealing a promise that neither of them fully understood yet, but both were determined to honor. The 6 days that followed were unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. Under HFY's guidance, he began to learn the true capabilities of the spear he now carried. It wasn't just a weapon, but a tool that could enhance his physical abilities, extend his senses, and even provide limited protection against energy attacks. The learning process was exhausting, requiring him to push his body and mind beyond what he had thought were his limits. The spear responds to intent and emotion, HFY explained during one of their training sessions. It amplifies what is already within you, your desire to protect, your willingness to sacrifice, your connection to something greater than yourself. Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead, breathing hard after an hour of practicing combat forms that seemed to flow naturally from the weapon into his muscles. "It feels like it's alive sometimes." In many ways, it is. Each spear contains a fragment of the living metal from the Vorthak homeworld, combined with neural pathways that can adapt to their bearer's mind. The longer you carry it, the more completely it will integrate with your consciousness. "And if the tribunal declares our bond invalid, what happens to the spear then?" HFY was quiet for a moment. It would likely go dormant until another suitable bearer could be found. "But, Marcus," she paused, then continued more softly, "I do not think that will happen. The bond between us grows stronger each day. Can you not feel it?" Marcus could indeed feel it. The awareness of her presence had grown from a vague sense to something almost like a second heartbeat in his chest. When she was happy, he felt lighter. When she was troubled, he found himself fighting the urge to find whatever was bothering her and fix it. More than once, he had started moving toward her location in the station before consciously realizing why. "Is it supposed to be this intense?" he asked. "I do not know," HFY admitted. "Bonds between Vorthak are rare enough, and I have never heard of a bond across species. We are exploring uncharted territory. Meanwhile, Veltar and Nixara worked with the rest of the mining station crew to establish communication with Earth and coordinate humanity's response to the tribunal. The implications of the situation had reached the highest levels of Earth's government, and Marcus found himself the subject of intense scrutiny from people he had never met. They want to send a diplomatic team, Sarah reported after one particularly long communication session. Full ambassadorial credentials, legal experts, the works. Can they get here in time? Marcus asked. Doubtful. The tribunal ship is faster than anything in Earth's fleet. We're on our own for the initial proceedings. The reality of that statement weighed heavily on everyone involved. Marcus was going to face an alien tribunal that would judge not just his personal worthiness, but humanity's fitness for galactic citizenship, and he would do it with only the resources of a small mining station and the guidance of 2 Jacquerie explorers. On the 4th day of preparation, something changed. Marcus was working through a particularly complex sequence of spear techniques when he felt a sudden shift in his bond with Kesva. Instead of her usual calm focus, he sensed alarm, followed quickly by anger and determination. He found her in the observation deck, staring out at the approaching tribunal ship, which had arrived ahead of schedule. But she wasn't looking at the massive vessel with its imposing array of weapons and sensors. She was looking at a smaller ship that had detached from it and was moving toward their station. What is it? Marcus asked, joining her at the observation window. That ship, Kesva said, her voice tight with emotion. I recognize the configuration. It belongs to High Counselor Zephyran. Marcus felt his blood go cold. Lirani's father? Yes. The man who holds me responsible for his daughter's death is coming to judge our bond. Kesva turned to face him, and Marcus could see the fear in her amber eyes. Marcus, this changes everything. Zephyran will not judge us fairly. He will use the tribunal to ensure that I am punished for my failures, regardless of what it means for you or your people. Marcus felt the spear respond to his rising anger, its energy signature shifting to match his emotional state. Then we'll have to prove him wrong. You don't understand, Kesva said urgently. Zephyran is one of the most powerful beings in the Confederation. His influence over the tribunal will be enormous. If he has decided that our bond is false, then nothing we say or do will matter. Marcus looked out at the approaching ship, then back at Kesva. He could feel their bond pulsing between them, could sense the depth of her fear and the weight of guilt she still carried. But he could also feel something else, her hope, fragile but real, that perhaps this time things might be different. Maybe it's not about convincing him, Marcus said slowly. Maybe it's about proving to him that you've found something worth protecting again, that the bond we share is real enough to risk everything for. Kesva stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You are either very wise or very foolish, Marcus Chen. Probably both, Marcus replied, feeling the spear pulse with approval in his hands. But we're going to face this together, just like we planned. As the ships continued their approach toward the mining station, Marcus found himself thinking about the chain of events that had brought them to this moment. A simple act of compassion, picking up a fallen warrior's weapon to protect her, had set in motion forces that could reshape the future of 2 species. Now it remained to be seen whether that act had been enough to forge something real between them, something strong enough to withstand the judgment of a bereaved father and the scrutiny of the galactic community. The tribunal was coming, and with it, the chance to prove that bonds formed in crisis could grow into something greater than either species could achieve alone. The tribunal ship docked with Kepler, 442 station like a predator claiming its territory. Marcus watched through the observation port as multiple airlocks extended from the massive vessel, creating what amounted to a temporary annexation of their small mining facility. Within hours, the station's population had tripled, filled with beings from across the galaxy who carried themselves with the authority of those accustomed to deciding the fate of civilizations. High Counselor Zephyran was the first aboard, and Marcus understood immediately why Kesva had feared his presence. The Jacquerie leader stood nearly 9 feet tall, his blue-green skin marked with intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with their own light. His metallic filaments moved with deliberate precision, and his dark eyes held the cold intelligence of someone who had spent decades navigating the treacherous waters of galactic politics. Behind him came the other tribunal members, a crystalline being whose faceted surface reflected light in rainbow patterns, a creature that looked like living shadow given form, and several others whose appearances defied easy description. Marcus felt the weight of their combined attention like a physical force, and the spear in his hands hummed with nervous energy. Marcus Chen of Earth, Zephyran said, his voice carrying harmonics that made the air itself seem to vibrate. You stand before the Confederation Tribunal charged with claiming a bond right that has not been invoked in over 1,000 years. Do you understand the gravity of this situation? I understand that my actions have consequences I'm still learning about. Marcus replied, proud that his voice remained steady. But I don't apologize for trying to protect someone who needed help. Protection, Zephyrin repeated, and Marcus could hear the bitter edge in the translated word. An interesting choice. Tell me, human, what do you know about protection? About the sacred duty to keep safe what has been entrusted to your care. Marcus felt Kesva tense beside him through their bond, but he forced himself to meet Zephyrin's gaze directly. I know that sometimes protection means doing something dangerous without thinking about the consequences. I know that caring about someone means being willing to take risks for their sake. Pretty words, Zephyrin said dismissively. But words are easy. The tribunal requires proof that your bond is genuine, that it represents something more than momentary attraction or political convenience. The crystalline being stepped forward, its voice sounding like wind chimes in a storm. The ancient laws specify 3 trials for bond verification across species. The trial of understanding, where the bonded must demonstrate knowledge of each other's true nature. The trial of sacrifice, where they must show willingness to place their partner's welfare above their own. And the trial of unity, where they must act as one mind in 2 bodies. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. And if we fail these trials?
If you fail, the shadow creature replied, its voice like whispers in the dark.
The bond will be dissolved, the human will be required to relinquish the Vortak weapon, and humanity's petition for Confederation membership will be denied. Furthermore, Zephyrin added with obvious satisfaction, Kesva will be charged with corrupting sacred law for personal gain and will face exile to the Void Reaches, where she will remain until her natural death. The Void Reaches. Marcus didn't know exactly what that meant, but he could feel Kesva's terror through their bond. Whatever that place was, it was considered worse than simple execution. However, the crystalline being continued. If you succeed, both your species will be granted provisional membership in the Confederation, with full voting rights to be considered after a period of observation. When do these trials begin? Marcus asked. Now, Zephyrin said, with obvious pleasure. We will commence with the trial of understanding. The tribunal members arranged themselves in a semicircle around Marcus and Kesva, their various forms of alien presence creating an almost overwhelming sense of being judged. Marcus felt the spear grow warm in his hands, as if responding to his nervousness. The trial of understanding requires each bonded partner to demonstrate complete knowledge of the other's essential nature, the crystalline being explained. You will be questioned separately, and your answers compared. Any significant discrepancy will be considered evidence that the bond is false. Marcus and Kesva were separated, taken to different sections of the expanded station complex. Marcus found himself in a small room with Zephyrin and the shadow creature, both of whom radiated the kind of cold intelligence that had built empires and destroyed them. Tell us about Kesva, Zephyrin commanded. What drives her? What does she fear? What does she hope for? Marcus took a deep breath, reaching through their bond to touch the emotions and memories that Kesva had shared with him over the past week. She's driven by guilt, he said. She blames herself for failing to protect someone she cared about, and that failure cost her not just her position, but her entire people, their place in the galaxy. Failure? Zephyrin repeated, and Marcus could hear the pain beneath his cold tone. Yes, she knows about failure. Continue. She fears failing again. Marcus continued. She's terrified that her past mistakes make her unworthy of trust, that anyone who depends on her will suffer the same fate as... He paused, realizing the sensitivity of mentioning Lyrani directly to her father. Say her name, Zephyrin commanded, his voice like ice. If you truly understand Kesva, you know the weight that name carries. Lyrani, Marcus said quietly. She fears that anyone who depends on her will suffer the same fate as Lyrani. Zephyrin nodded stiffly. And what does she hope for? This was more difficult. Hope was something Kesva had buried so deep that Marcus had to reach through layers of pain and self-doubt to find it. She hopes for redemption, he said finally. Not forgiveness. She doesn't think she deserves that. But she hopes for a chance to prove that her people's traditions meant something, that the bond we share can help the scattered Vortak find their place in the galaxy again. The shadow creature leaned forward. And you, human? What do you feel when you look at her? Marcus considered the question carefully. I feel protective. Not because she's weak, she's probably the strongest person I've ever met. But because she carries so much pain alone, and I can't stand the thought of her facing that without support. Protective, Zephyrin mused. An interesting word choice. Do you love her? The question caught Marcus off guard. Love was something he had been carefully not thinking about, aware that their bond was so new and the circumstances so strange that normal emotions might be distorted. I don't know, he answered honestly. What I feel for her is unlike anything I've experienced before. It's deeper than attraction, stronger than friendship. But whether it's love or something else entirely created by the bond itself, he shrugged. I care about her welfare more than my own. If that's love, then yes. Meanwhile, in another section of the station, Kesva faced similar questions from the other tribunal members. Marcus could feel her nervousness through their connection, but also her determination to answer truthfully. When they were reunited an hour later, the tribunal members conferred among themselves in rapid exchanges that the translation system couldn't follow. Finally, the crystalline being spoke. Your understanding of each other appears genuine, though limited by the brief time you have been bonded. The first trial is passed, but barely. Marcus felt a small surge of relief, quickly followed by apprehension about what came next. The trial of sacrifice, Zephyrin announced, will test your willingness to place your partner's welfare above your own survival. This trial is traditionally conducted in combat, where each partner must choose between their own safety and their bondmate's protection. Combat? Marcus asked, alarmed. Against whom? Against each other, the shadow creature replied with what might have been amusement. You will be placed in a situation where you can save yourself only by allowing harm to come to your partner. Your choices will reveal the true nature of your bond. Marcus felt his stomach drop. I won't fight Kesva. You will not have a choice, Zephyrin said coldly. The trial scenarios are designed to force genuine decisions under pressure. Refusal to participate will be considered evidence that the bond is false. The tribunal led them to what had once been the station's main cargo bay, now transformed into something resembling a combat arena. Energy barriers created a circular fighting space, while holographic projectors generated a scenario that made Marcus's heart race. They were standing in what appeared to be a collapsing space station, with debris falling around them and atmosphere venting through multiple breaches. In the center of the arena stood 2 escape pods, but only one appeared to be functional. The scenario is simple, the crystalline being explained. The station is suffering catastrophic failure. There is one functioning escape pod, which can carry only one person to safety. The other pod has a 50% chance of successful launch. You have 30 seconds to decide who takes the functional pod. Marcus looked at Keshra, who was staring at the pods with obvious calculation. Through their bond, he could feel her already making the decision to force him into the working pod, regardless of his protests. There has to be another way, he said. 20 seconds, the shadow creature announced. Marcus ran toward the pods, the spear in his hands suddenly feeling heavier. Kesva moved at the same time, clearly intending to physically force him into the safer option. But as they reached the escape pods, Marcus made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. Instead of trying to get into either pod, he turned and struck the functional pod with his spear, channeling energy through the weapon to disable its systems. "What are you doing?" Kesva shouted over the simulated chaos. "Evening the odds," Marcus replied, grabbing her hand. "If we both have a 50% chance, then we face it together." They climbed into the remaining pod together, Marcus wrapping his arms around Kesva as the simulation launched them into space. The pod shook and sparked, systems failing around them, but it held together long enough to reach the safety zone. When the simulation ended, the arena fell silent. The tribunal members were staring at them with expressions that Marcus couldn't interpret. "Fascinating," the crystalline being said finally. "Rather than accept the terms of the trial, you chose to redefine them. You rejected the assumption that one of you must be sacrificed. The trial was designed to force a choice between individual survival and the bond," Zephyrin said, and Marcus thought he detected a note of surprise in the counselor's voice. "You refused to make that choice, because it was a false choice," Marcus said, still holding Kesva close. "The bond doesn't mean one of us is more valuable than the other. It means we succeed or fail together." The shadow creature moved closer. "And if your actions had doomed you both to death, would you still consider it the correct choice?" Marcus looked into Kesva's amber eyes. Seeing wonder, and something that might have been love reflected there. Yes, he said without hesitation. If we can't protect each other, then the bond doesn't mean anything. The second trial is past, the crystalline being announced. But your interpretation raises questions about the final trial. The trial of unity requires the bonded pair to act as one mind in two bodies, Zefran explained. Traditionally, this involves a synchronized combat exercise, where perfect coordination is required for success. However, your approach to the previous trial suggests that you may have already achieved a level of unity that makes such a test redundant. Marcus felt a flicker of hope, quickly dampened by the cold expression on Zefran's face. Therefore, the counselor continued, we have decided to implement a different test. You will face an opponent in combat, but not each other. You will face me. The arena reconfigured itself, expanding to provide more space and generating weapons racks along the walls. Zefran moved to one side, his form shifting as what Marcus had taken for ceremonial robes revealed themselves to be advanced combat armor. Energy weapons materialized in the counselor's hands, and his entire presence seemed to radiate lethal capability. This is not about winning or losing, he said, his voice now carrying the authority of someone who had commanded fleets in battle. This is about demonstrating that your bond allows you to function as a unified fighting force. I will attack both of you simultaneously. Your survival depends on your ability to coordinate your actions perfectly. Marcus felt Kesvar's hand close over his on the spear's shaft. Through their bond, he could sense her tactical assessment of their situation, her evaluation of Zefran's capabilities, and her strategy for keeping them both alive. Trust me, she whispered. Let the bond guide your movements. Feel what I feel, move as I move. The combat began without warning. Zefran launched himself across the arena with inhuman speed, energy blasts streaming from his weapons. Marcus barely had time to process what was happening before his body was moving, guided by Kesvar's warrior instincts channeled through their bond. He found himself sliding under an energy blast while Kesvar vaulted over him, both of them moving in perfect synchronization despite never having trained together in combat. The spear in his hands felt alive, its energy matrix responding to both their intentions simultaneously. Zefran was relentless, his attacks coming from multiple angles with the precision of someone who had spent centuries perfecting the art of war. But Marcus discovered that through the bond, he could anticipate the counselor's moves almost as well as Kesvar could. More than that, he could feel her emotions, her memories of similar fights, her knowledge of combat tactics flowing into his consciousness like water filling a vessel. They moved like dancers, each action flowing seamlessly into the next. When Marcus created an opening with a defensive maneuver, Kesvar was already moving to exploit it. When she needed support, he was there to provide it without conscious thought. But the most remarkable thing was how their individual strengths complemented each other. Kesvar's warrior training gave them tactical knowledge and combat experience. Marcus's engineering background provided problem-solving skills and an intuitive understanding of energy systems that let him use the spear in ways she had never considered. The fight continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Gradually, Marcus realized that Zefran was no longer pressing his attacks with quite the same intensity. The counselor was observing them, watching how they moved together, how they anticipated each other's needs. Finally, Zefran stepped back and lowered his weapons. Enough, he said. Marcus and Kesvar froze, still moving in perfect harmony even as they came to a stop. The spear in Marcus's hands was glowing with stable silver light, and he could feel the bond between them humming with energy. The trial of unity is complete, the crystalline being announced. The coordination demonstrated exceeds the requirements for bond verification. Marcus felt a surge of relief, followed quickly by confusion as he saw the expression on Zefran's face. The counselor was looking at them with something that might have been wonder, but also deep, abiding pain. You moved together as Lirani and I once did, Zefran said quietly. She was trained in the old combat arts, and we often sparred together when she was young. Watching you. He paused, his metallic filaments shifting in patterns that suggested emotional distress. I had forgotten how beautiful true partnership in battle could be. The arena fell silent, except for the hum of energy barriers. Marcus could feel Kesvar's shock through their bond, followed by a complex mix of hope and terror. Hi, counselor, she said carefully. I know that no words can undo what happened to Lirani. I know that my failure cost you the most precious thing in your life. But I swear to you, by the bond I now share with Marcus, that I will never again allow someone under my protection to suffer because of my inadequacy. Zefran studied her for a long moment. You speak of never again failing, he said finally. But you assume that you failed in the first place. I don't understand, Kesva replied. I have spent 3 years investigating my daughter's death, Zefran said, his voice heavy with old grief. The liberation front that captured her was funded and equipped by my political enemies within the Confederation. They used weapons that should not have existed, had intelligence that should not have been available to them. The attack was not a random act of terrorism. It was an assassination designed to remove both Lirani and me from the political arena. Marcus felt Kesva's world shift through their bond, years of guilt and self-blame suddenly confronted with new information.
You could not have protected her from that level of conspiracy,
Zefran continued. No single warrior could have. I blamed you, because blaming you was easier than accepting that my own political activities had made my daughter a target. Tears were streaming down Kesva's face now, and Marcus could feel her emotional turmoil, like a storm in his chest. 3 years of believing herself responsible for a failure that might not have been her fault at all. The trials are complete, Zefran announced to the assembled tribunal. The bond between Marcus Chen of Earth and Kesva of the Vortak is verified as genuine. Both individuals have demonstrated worthiness for the responsibilities they claim. Furthermore, he continued, his voice growing stronger, I recommend that both species be granted full membership in the Confederation, with all the rights and protections that entails. The bond they share represents the best qualities of both cultures: courage, compassion, and the willingness to sacrifice for others. Marcus felt the weight of the past weeks settling on his shoulders, the magnitude of what they had accomplished and what it meant for the future. But more than that, he felt the warmth of Kesva's presence in his mind, the knowledge that they had proven their bond was real in every way that mattered. As the tribunal members began the formal procedures for recording their decision, Marcus found himself thinking about the chain of events that had brought them to this moment. A broken spear, a moment of compassion, and the courage to face the unknown together. They had passed the trials, but Marcus suspected that the real test of their bond was just beginning. 3 months had passed since the tribunal's decision, and Marcus was beginning to understand that passing the trials had been the easy part. The real challenge was learning to live as representatives of 2 species who were now full members of the Galactic Confederation, with all the political complexities that status entailed. The mining station had been transformed into something resembling a small embassy. Confederation engineers had expanded the facility, adding diplomatic quarters, communication arrays that could reach across the galaxy in real time, and security systems that made Marcus slightly nervous. Sarah Kim had been promoted to Earth's first Galactic Liaison Officer, while the Morrison twins had volunteered for extended tours studying Confederation technology. Marcus himself had been given a title that sounded impressive in translation: Honor Guard Prime of the Human Vortak Alliance. What it meant in practical terms was that he spent his days learning about galactic politics, military protocols, and the intricate web of relationships between species that had been building for thousands of years. Kesva had changed as well. The revelation that she bore less responsibility for Lyrani's death than she had believed had lifted a weight from her shoulders that Marcus felt through their bond. She moved with more confidence now, spoke with greater authority, and had begun reaching out to the scattered Vortak communities throughout the galaxy. 17 confirmed groups, she reported during their morning briefing, her amber eyes bright with something that Marcus was learning to recognize as hope. Most are working as mercenaries or private security, but they remember the old traditions. They want to come home. Home to where? Marcus asked, looking up from the latest reports from Earth's diplomatic corps. The Vortak homeworlds were destroyed or abandoned years ago. Not destroyed, Kesva corrected. Abandoned, yes, but the planets themselves are still there. The Confederation Council has agreed to return territorial rights to any Vortak who wish to reclaim their heritage. It will take years to rebuild, but it can be done. Marcus felt a flutter of excitement through their bond, but also something else. Uncertainty, perhaps even fear. What is it? He asked, setting down his reports. Kesva was quiet for a moment, her hand unconsciously moving to touch the spear she now carried again. Zefran had returned her original weapon after the tribunal, saying that she had earned the right to bear it once more. But Marcus still carried the spear that had first bonded them, the 2 weapons now forming a pair that the Confederation's weapons specialists were studying with intense interest. The Council has made an offer, she said finally. They want to establish a joint training facility on one of the reclaimed Vortak worlds, a place where warriors from multiple species can learn the old traditions, develop new techniques for interspecies cooperation in military operations. That sounds like a good thing, Marcus said carefully, sensing there was more to it. It is a good thing. It would give my people purpose again, a way to serve the Confederation that honors our traditions. It would also serve as a symbol of what our bond represents: cooperation between species, strength found in unity rather than isolation. Marcus waited, knowing from experience that Kesva often took time to work up to difficult topics. They want us to run it, she said finally. Together. As bondmates, we would oversee the training of warriors from across the Confederation, helping to develop new strategies for multi-species cooperation. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. He paused, trying to process the implications. That's a huge responsibility. It is more than that, Kesva said, moving to sit beside him. It would mean leaving human space, possibly for years at a time. It would mean dedicating our lives to something larger than either of our individual species. And it would mean... She trailed off, but Marcus could sense what she was struggling to say through their bond. It would mean committing fully to each other, to the bond they shared, in a way that went beyond the trials they had passed. It would mean making our partnership permanent, he finished for her. Yes. The position comes with formal recognition as bondmates under Confederation law. It would make us equals in the eyes of every species in the galaxy, with all the legal protections and responsibilities that implies. Marcus stood up and walked to the observation window, looking out at the stars that had once seemed impossibly distant and now felt like neighbors. 3 months ago, he had been a mining engineer whose biggest concern was keeping the coffee machine working. Now he was being offered the chance to help shape military doctrine for an entire galactic civilization. What do you want? He asked, turning back to face her. Kesva met his eyes directly. I want to rebuild what was lost when my people scattered. I want to prove that the bond traditions mean something real, that they can bring out the best in all species willing to embrace them. And I want to do it with you, if you are willing. Marcus felt the truth of her words resonate through their connection, but he also sensed the deeper emotion beneath them. Over the past 3 months, what had begun as a bond forged in crisis had grown into something much more personal. They had learned to work together, to anticipate each other's needs, to communicate without words through the connection the spears had created between them. But more than that, Marcus had come to care for Kesva in ways that went far beyond duty or shared responsibility. When she laughed, something that happened more and more frequently as she healed from her old guilt, he felt joy in his chest like sunlight. When she was troubled by news from the scattered Vortak communities, he found himself losing sleep until he could find a way to help. I love you, he said suddenly, the words surprising him even as he spoke them. Kesva's eyes widened, and Marcus felt a surge of emotion through their bond so intense it left him breathless. Marcus, I know it's complicated, he continued quickly. I know we're bonded through alien technology and ancient laws that neither of us fully understands. I know that what I feel might be influenced by the spears or by the connection between our minds. But I also know that when I look at you, when I think about spending my life working alongside you to build something meaningful, it feels right in a way that nothing else ever has. Kesva stood and moved toward him, her graceful stride carrying her across the room in moments. When she reached him, she placed her hands on either side of his face, her golden skin warm against his. The bond did not create love between us, she said softly. It simply made it impossible to hide from each other. I have felt your affection growing stronger each day, just as you have felt mine. What we share now goes far beyond duty or ancient law. Marcus leaned into her touch, marveling at how natural it felt despite the fundamental differences between them. So, what do we do about the Council's offer? We accept it, Kesva said without hesitation. Together, we can give both our peoples something neither could achieve alone. A future where strength comes not from conquest or domination, but from partnership and mutual respect. Before Marcus could respond, an urgent chime came from the communication system. Sarah Kim's voice followed immediately after. Marcus, Kesva, we need you in the command center immediately. We're receiving emergency transmissions from multiple sources. They found Sarah standing in front of the main display screen, her face pale with concern. The Morrison twins were at their stations, working frantically to process incoming data streams. What's the situation? Marcus asked. Remember the Liberation Front that killed Lyrani? Sarah said without preamble. They're back, and they're not happy about humanity joining the Confederation. The main screen lit up with tactical displays showing ship movements throughout the local sector. Marcus could see dozens of vessels converging on human space, their energy signatures marking them as heavily armed and moving with military precision. How many? Kisvei asked, her warrior instincts immediately engaging. At least 40 ships in the first wave, Tom Morrison reported. But that's not the worst part. They're broadcasting demands for Earth's immediate withdrawal from the Confederation, and they're threatening to target human civilian populations if their demands aren't met. Marcus felt his blood go cold. They're using the same tactics they used against Lyrany, but on a larger scale. It gets worse, Jake Morrison added. Intelligence reports suggest they have support from within the Confederation itself. Some of the older species apparently aren't happy about humans and Vortak gaining full membership so quickly. Veltar and Nixara entered the command center, both looking grim. We have received similar reports from Confederation Command, Veltar said. The Liberation Front has grown significantly since their attack on Lyrani. They now have backing from several rogue factions who oppose the Confederation's expansion policies. What kind of backing? Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer wouldn't be good. Military hardware, primarily, Nixara replied, her scanner device already active as she analyzed the tactical displays. Ships that rival Confederation military vessels, weapons that can penetrate standard defensive shields, and most concerning of all, intelligence about human defensive capabilities that should not be available to outside organizations. Kesper moved to study the ship movement patterns, her amber eyes tracking the enemy formations with professional interest. This is coordinated, she said. Multiple strike groups moving in synchronized attack patterns. Whoever is commanding this operation has significant military experience. Any idea who that might be? Sarah asked. Veltar exchanged a look with Nixara before answering. We have suspicions, but no proof. There have been rumors for months about a shadow faction within the Confederation military. Officers who believe that expansion should be limited to species with proven track records spanning millennia, not newcomers like humans who have achieved spaceflight only recently. Marcus felt a chill of understanding. You think someone in the Confederation military is using the Liberation Front as a proxy to test human defenses, maybe even to justify removing us from membership? It would not be the first time such tactics have been used, Kesva said grimly. During the early days of my people's association with the Confederation, several pirate attacks against Vorthak settlements turned out to be orchestrated by political rivals who wanted to demonstrate our inability to protect our own territories. The implications were staggering. If Confederation officials were behind the Liberation Front's attacks, then humanity was facing not just a terrorist organization, but a faction of the Galactic government itself. What are Earth's defenses like? Marcus asked, though he feared he already knew the answer. Not good enough, Sarah said bluntly. Humanity's fleet is designed for system defense and limited interstellar patrol work. Against 40 ships with Confederation-level technology, Earth's orbital stations won't last long enough to mount an effective defense.
Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders.
As Honor Guard Prime, he was technically responsible for coordinating human Confederation military cooperation. The problem was that he had 3 months of training in galactic politics and a lifetime of experience fixing mining equipment. There has to be something we can do, he said, looking around the room at the assembled faces. Some way to help Earth defend itself. Actually, there might be, Kesva said slowly, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. Marcus, how many Vorthak communities did you say had responded to our outreach efforts? 17 confirmed groups, he replied, not seeing where she was going with this. 17 groups of experienced warriors with no current military obligations and a strong motivation to prove their worth to the Confederation. She continued, warriors who would fight very hard to protect the species that gave their honor guard a new purpose in life. Understanding dawned on Marcus like a physical sensation. You want to rally the scattered Vorthak to defend Earth, not just defend, Kesva corrected. I want to demonstrate that the bond we share represents something real, something worth fighting for. If the Liberation Front wants to test whether humans deserve Confederation membership, let them face humans fighting alongside their chosen bond mates. Veltar looked intrigued. It would certainly send a political message, and the military capabilities of Vortak warriors are well documented throughout the Confederation. But can you contact and coordinate 17 scattered groups in time to make a difference? Kesva smiled, and Marcus felt a familiar warmth through their bond. That depends on whether my bondmate is willing to help me send a message that will reach every Vortak in the galaxy. Marcus looked at the spear he carried, feeling its energy pulse in response to his emotions. Over the past 3 months, he had learned that the weapons were more than just individual tools. They were connected to a larger network that linked all Vortak warriors, no matter how far apart they were. "What kind of message?" he asked. "A call to arms," Kesvar replied. "A chance for the scattered children of the warrior clans to stand together one last time in defense of something greater than themselves." The idea was audacious, probably dangerous, and almost certainly their only chance of mounting an effective defense in time. Marcus looked around the command center, seeing hope beginning to replace despair on the faces of his friends and colleagues. "How do we do it?" he asked. Kesvar gestured toward the main display. "The spears can create a resonance field that will carry our message across subspace to every Vortak warrior in the galaxy. But it requires both weapons working in perfect harmony, and the energy output will be enormous."
Enormous how? Sarah asked suspiciously.
"The resonance field will announce our location to every ship within several light years," Nixara said, understanding the implications immediately, "including the Liberation Front forces moving toward Earth."
Marcus felt his stomach drop.
"So we'd be painting a target on ourselves." "More than that," Veltar added. "If the Liberation Front is being supported by Confederation military factions, they will see this as an opportunity to eliminate both of you before you can rally significant support. They will almost certainly divert forces to attack this station." Marcus looked at Kesvar, seeing his own determination reflected in her amber eyes. Through their bond, he could feel her resolve, her willingness to risk everything for the chance to give their peoples a real future. "Then we'd better make sure our message is worth the risk," he said. The next hour was a blur of preparation and coordination. Veltar and Nixara worked to establish secure communication links with Confederation Command, hoping to identify allies within the military hierarchy. Sarah and the Morrison twins focused on upgrading the station's defensive systems, though they all knew that their small facility couldn't withstand a concentrated attack from military-grade vessels. Marcus and Kesvar prepared for the resonance transmission. That would either rally the scattered Vortak to their cause, or announce their location to enemies who had every reason to see them dead. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked as they stood in the station's communication array, their spears humming with building energy. "No," Kesvar replied honestly. "But I am sure that hiding will not solve our problems. If the bond we share means anything, if the partnership between our species is going to survive, then we must be willing to fight for it." Marcus nodded, raising his spear to match the angle of hers. The weapons began to resonate with each other, their energy fields interacting to create patterns of light that seemed to bend space around them. "What do we say?" he asked. Kesvar smiled. "We tell them the truth. That two species found strength in unity, and that anyone who threatens that unity will have to face both of us together." The resonance field built to a crescendo, and Marcus felt the message flowing out from their weapons like ripples in a cosmic pond. Words in Vortak that his bond with Kesvar let him understand, carrying the weight of ancient traditions and the promise of new hope. "Children of the warrior clans, scattered among the stars, hear us. The bond of honor guards has been renewed, forged between species in the fire of mutual respect and shared sacrifice. Our bondmates, the humans of Earth, face enemies who would deny them the place they have earned among the stars. We call upon all who remember the old ways to stand with us, to prove that the traditions of our people still have meaning in the modern galaxy. Come and fight alongside those who have shown us that bonds formed in compassion are stronger than those forged in conquest." The message pulsed out into the void, carried by technologies that predated most of the current Confederation species. Marcus felt a moment of profound connection, not just to Kesvar, but to the network of warriors scattered throughout the galaxy. Then the proximity alarms began screaming. "Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace," Tom Morrison announced, his voice tight with tension. 15 vessels, moving fast and armed for bear." Marcus looked at the tactical display, seeing the Liberation Front ships arranging themselves in attack formation around the station. They had taken the bait, but that meant the real test was just beginning. "Any response to our message?" he asked. "Too early to tell," Kesvar replied, though Marcus could feel her hope through their bond. "Hyperspace travel takes time, even for the fastest ships. Then we hold out as long as we can," Sarah said, moving into full command mode. "All stations, prepare for combat. This is not a drill." As the station's defenders scrambled to their positions, Marcus found himself thinking about the choice they had made. They had gambled everything on the hope that bonds formed in crisis could grow strong enough to change the galaxy. In the next few hours, they would discover whether that hope was justified, or whether they had simply made themselves targets for forces too powerful to resist. Through the observation windows, he could see the Liberation Front ships moving into position, their weapons charging for what would almost certainly be a devastating first strike. But he could also feel something else. distant presences touching the edge of his consciousness through the spear's connection, responses to their call that were still too far away to identify clearly. The scattered Vortak had heard their message. Whether they would arrive in time to make a difference remained to be seen. Marcus tightened his grip on his spear and prepared to defend the bond that had changed his life, hoping that the courage of two species fighting together would be enough to face whatever came next. The first attack came without warning, a concentrated barrage of energy weapons that overwhelmed the station's shields in seconds. Marcus felt the deck shudder beneath his feet as explosions echoed through the corridors, and emergency lighting cast everything in an ominous red glow. Hull breaches in Sections 7 and 12. Jake Morrison reported from his emergency station. Life support is holding, but we've lost primary power to the defensive arrays. Marcus moved through the station with Kespar at his side, their spears providing both illumination and protection as they helped coordinate the defense. The weapons had evolved during their months of partnership, developing capabilities that surprised even the Confederation's weapons specialists. They could project energy shields, interface with the station's computer systems, and most remarkably, they seemed to enhance the bond between their bearers to the point where Marcus and Kesva could coordinate their actions with inhuman precision. "Sarah, what's our status?" Marcus called into his communicator as they reached the main engineering section. "Not good," came the reply. "The Liberation Front ships are using some kind of adaptive shielding that adjusts to our weapons' frequencies in real time. Our defensive fire is barely scratching them." Through the observation ports, Marcus could see the enemy vessels moving with predatory grace around the station, their hulls shifting color as they adapted to each defensive measure. It was clear that whoever had equipped these ships had access to military technology far beyond what a terrorist organization should possess. "Any word from the Vortak?" he asked Kesva, though he could feel through their bond that she was monitoring the spear's network constantly. "Responses are coming in," she replied, her amber eyes distant with concentration. "But the closest groups are still hours away at maximum hyperspace velocity." Marcus felt his heart sink. Hours they didn't have, judging by the way the station shook under each successive attack. "Wait," Kesva said suddenly, her expression changing. "There's something else. The spear network is detecting other signatures, closer than the Vortak responses." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, Veltar's voice crackled over the communication system. "Unknown vessels dropping out of hyperspace bearing 27 Mark 4. Configuration. I don't recognize the design." Marcus and Kesva rushed to the nearest observation point, looking out to see 3 ships that defied easy classification. They were smaller than the Liberation Front vessels, but moved with a grace that suggested advanced technology. Their hulls seemed to shimmer with energy patterns that reminded Marcus of the spear's glow. "Those are consortium ships," Kesva said, wonder in her voice. "Consortium?" Marcus asked. "An organization that predates the current Confederation by thousands of years. They're supposed to be myths, stories told to young warriors about the ancient guardians who protected the galaxy before the modern political structures developed." One of the new ships moved between the station and the attacking Liberation Front vessels, its hull suddenly blazing with defensive fire that made the enemy ship's shields flare and buckle. "Station Kepler, 442. A new voice came over the communications array, speaking in tones that seemed to harmonize with themselves. "This is Consortium Vessel Harmony's Edge. We have detected resonance patterns consistent with activated ancient bonds. Are you the source of the warrior call that has echoed across the galaxy?" Marcus looked at Kesva, seeing his own amazement reflected in her expression. "Yes," he replied, keying the transmitter. "We are." "Then we stand with you," the voice replied. "Ancient bonds must be protected regardless of the political consequences." The 3 consortium ships moved into formation around the station, their weapons firing with precision that put the Liberation Front's technology to shame. But Marcus could see that even this unexpected help wouldn't be enough. The enemy still outnumbered them significantly, and more Liberation Front vessels were arriving every few minutes. Then the real miracle happened. "Multiple hyperspace signatures," Tom Morrison announced, his voice filled with amazement. "Dozens of ships, all converging on our position." Through the observation windows, Marcus watched as ship after ship dropped out of hyperspace around them. Vortak vessels with their distinctive flowing hulls, but also ships from species he didn't recognize, all moving with the coordinated precision of a fleet that had been planning this moment for years. "Marcus Kesva," another voice came over the communications array. This one, speaking in Vortak, that the translation system converted to accented but clear English. "This is War Leader Takfon of the Scattered Clans. We received your call, bondmates, and we have brought allies. Marcus felt tears on his cheeks as he watched the assembled fleet move into defensive positions around the station. There had to be nearly 100 ships now, representing not just the scattered Vortak but dozens of other species. How? He asked, barely able to speak. Your bond has been observed throughout the galaxy, Takfon replied. The story of the human who lifted a broken spear to protect a fallen warrior has spread far beyond the Confederation's official channels. Many species remember the old ways, the time when strength came from unity rather than conquest. When your call went out, we were ready to answer. The tide of battle turned dramatically. The Liberation Front ships, designed to overwhelm a small station's defenses, found themselves facing a coordinated multi-species fleet with technology spanning thousands of years of galactic development. The consortium vessels alone were proving capable of disabling enemy ships without destroying them, using weapons that seemed to target the attacker's ability to fight, rather than their ability to survive. But the real surprise came when High Counselor Zephran's voice joined the communication frequency. Liberation Front vessels. This is High Counselor Zephran of the Confederation Military Command. You are ordered to cease your attacks immediately and surrender for questioning regarding your illegal military actions. Through the observation windows, Marcus could see Confederation military vessels dropping out of hyperspace, their massive hulls bristling with weapons that dwarfed everything else in the local area. Furthermore, Zephran continued, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded fleets for decades, any Confederation officers involved in supporting these attacks are hereby relieved of duty and ordered to report for tribunal. The Confederation does not make war on its own members. The Liberation Front ships tried to flee, but they were hopelessly outmatched. Within minutes, most had been disabled or captured, their crews taken into custody by Confederation security forces. As the immediate crisis passed, Marcus found himself standing in the station's observation lounge, looking out at the incredible fleet that had assembled to answer their call. Kesva stood beside him, her hand intertwined with his, both of them trying to process what they had witnessed. I don't understand, Marcus said finally. How did word of our bond spread so far so fast? Velta joined them at the observation window, his expression thoughtful. You underestimate the power of hope, he said. The galaxy has been watching humanity since your first steps into space, wondering what you would bring to the Confederation. When you lifted Kesvar's spear, when you chose to risk everything to protect someone you barely knew, it resonated with something that many species thought had been lost. What do you mean? Kesvar asked. The willingness to act from compassion rather than calculation, Nixara said, approaching the group. Most species join the Confederation because it serves their political or economic interests. Humans joined because you couldn't stand to watch others suffer alone. That difference matters more than you know. Over the following days, as the fleet gradually dispersed and the immediate crisis passed, Marcus and Kesver learned the full scope of what their bond had achieved. The consortium, thought to be extinct, had revealed themselves to support the ancient bond traditions. Over 30 species had sent representatives to demonstrate their support for the human Vorthak alliance. And perhaps most importantly, the corruption within the Confederation military that had been funding the Liberation Front had been exposed and eliminated. The Council has made a decision, Zephran informed them during a formal meeting a week later. The joint training facility we discussed will be established, but not on a reclaimed Vorthak world. It will be built here, in human space, as a symbol of what can be achieved when species choose cooperation over competition. Marcus felt a surge of excitement, followed quickly by apprehension. Here? But we're just a mining station on the edge of nowhere. Not anymore, Zephran said, with something that might have been a smile. Kepler 442 is now the official headquarters of the Interspecies Cooperation Initiative, with full diplomatic status and protection under Confederation law. You and Kesver will oversee not just warrior training, but the development of policies for multi-species cooperation throughout the galaxy. The implications were staggering. Their small mining station was about to become one of the most important diplomatic outposts in the Confederation, and Marcus was going from fixing coffee machines to helping shape galactic policy. Are we qualified for something like that? He asked honestly. Qualification is not about training or credentials, Kesver said, her amber eyes bright with understanding. It is about the willingness to put the welfare of others before your own interests. You have already proven that. Both of you have, Zephran agreed. The bond you share has demonstrated something that politicians and military leaders have been unable to achieve for centuries, that true strength comes not from dominance but from partnership. Over the months that followed, Marcus watched as their small station grew into something unrecognizable. Construction ships from dozens of species worked together to build facilities that represented the best of each culture's architectural traditions. The Vortak designed training areas that enhanced both physical and mental discipline. The Jacquerie contributed research laboratories where the most advanced minds in the galaxy could work on projects requiring multiple species expertise. Even the mysterious consortium provided technologies that had been lost for millennia. But the most remarkable change was in the people who came to work there. Warriors from across the galaxy arrived to learn the techniques that Marcus and Kesvar had developed for cross-species cooperation. Diplomats came to study how different cultures could find common ground. Scientists came to research the bond phenomenon and its implications for interspecies relationships. "It's working," Sarah Kim said during one of their regular briefings, her voice filled with amazement. "The cooperation protocols we developed here are being implemented throughout Confederation space. Species that have been suspicious of each other for centuries are beginning to work together." Marcus looked around the conference room, seeing representatives from dozens of species working together on problems that would have been impossible for any single culture to solve alone. Through his bond with Kesvar, he could sense her deep satisfaction at seeing her people's traditions not just preserved, but evolved into something greater. "There's something else," Kesvar added, her tone carrying news that made Marcus's heart race. "The Spear Network has detected new resonances, other bonds forming between species throughout the galaxy. What we started here is spreading." Marcus felt a profound sense of wonder at the idea. Their simple act of compassion, picking up a fallen warrior's weapon to protect her, had somehow catalyzed a transformation that was spreading throughout galactic civilization. "So, what happens now?" he asked. "Now we continue the work," Zephyrin said, entering the conference room with an expression of deep satisfaction. "The Confederation Council has voted to make the Interspecies Cooperation Initiative a permanent institution. You two will continue to oversee its development, but you won't be alone. Species throughout the galaxy are volunteering to contribute resources, personnel, and expertise." Marcus looked at Kesvar, seeing his own emotions reflected in her amber eyes. Pride, wonder, and above all, love that had grown from shared purpose into something deeper than either had imagined possible. "Any regrets?" she asked quietly as the meeting dispersed and they found themselves alone. Marcus considered the question seriously. His life had changed beyond recognition from the quiet routine of a mining engineer.
He now carried responsibilities that affected the welfare of entire civilizations, lived in a facility that had become one of the most important locations in the galaxy, and was bonded to a warrior whose courage and strength humbled him daily.
"None," he said finally, taking her hand and feeling the warm pulse of their connection.
"Everything we've built here started because I couldn't stand to watch you suffer alone. If that instinct led to all of this, then it was the best decision I've ever made." Kesvar smiled, the expression that still had the power to transform her entire face. "The old legends say that the strongest bonds are forged in fire, tested in battle, and proven in the crucible of shared purpose. We have done all three, and emerged stronger than either of us could have been alone." Marcus looked out through the observation windows at the ships coming and going from their station, carrying representatives from species across the galaxy, who came to learn about cooperation, partnership, and the strength that could be found in unity. He had lifted her broken spear to protect her, unaware that ancient law had already made him her chosen one. That the real law, the one that mattered more than any ancient tradition, was the one they had written together through their actions. The law that said bonds formed in compassion could change the galaxy, that strength shared between equals was greater than power held by one, and that sometimes the most important moments in history began with the simple decision to help someone who needed it. The spear in his hands pulsed with warm light, responding to his emotions and to the presence of the remarkable woman who had become his partner in every sense of the word. Together they watched the stars beyond their station, knowing that their bond had helped to make the galaxy a place where cooperation was stronger than conquest, where different species could find strength in their differences rather than fear. Their story had begun with a broken spear and a moment of compassion. It had grown into something that would reshape galactic civilization for generations to come. And at its heart, it remained what it had always been, the story of two people who chose to face the universe together, bound by laws deeper than politics and stronger than time. The galaxy was learning that humanity's greatest gift was not their technology or their ambition, but their instinct to protect those who could not protect themselves. And in learning that lesson, every species in the Confederation was discovering new possibilities for what they could become when they chose unity over isolation. Marcus Chen had been wrong about first contact. It hadn't involved grand speeches or diplomatic ceremonies. It had involved a human engineer picking up an alien weapon to protect a fallen warrior, not knowing that this simple act would echo across the stars and change the course of galactic history. But perhaps that was exactly how first contact was supposed to happen. Not through the careful calculations of diplomats and politicians, but through the spontaneous compassion of ordinary people who saw someone in need and chose to help. The bond between Marcus and Kesva had proven that love could transcend species, that courage could inspire transformation, and that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe was simply the willingness to lift someone up when they had fallen. As they stood together watching the stars, their hands intertwined and their spears humming with shared energy, Marcus knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, filled with species still learning to trust each other, still discovering what they could accomplish together. But with every bond that formed, with every act of cooperation that succeeded, with every moment when compassion won out over fear, the future grew brighter. They had changed the galaxy by changing each other. And in a universe full of infinite possibilities, that seemed like a pretty good place to start.